It was December 12th, 2022. The tropical sun hung golden over Nassau, casting long shadows across the palm-lined streets of one of the most exclusive communities on Earth. Inside a sprawling penthouse overlooking the turquoise waters of the Caribbean, a young man with a wild mop of curly hair sat quietly, staring at his laptop screen. Just weeks earlier, he had been worth $26 billion. Now, police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer with each passing second. The Royal Bahamas police force was coming for him. Samuel Bankman-Fried, the man the world had once called crypto's golden boy, its savior, its next Warren Buffett, was about to be arrested in the very palace he had built, from other people's dreams. The $40 million penthouse that had hosted presidents and celebrities would soon become a crime scene. The empire constructed on promises and digital coins was crumbling, and $8 billion of customer money had vanished into thin air. But to understand how one of history's greatest financial frauds unfolded in this tropical paradise, we must first travel back to where it all began. Not in the glittering towers of the Bahamas, but in the quiet academic world of Stanford, California. A boy born to think differently. Samuel Benjamin Bankman-Fried came into the world on March 5, 1992, on the campus of Stanford University. His parents were not ordinary people. Joseph Bankman and Barbara Fried were both distinguished professors at Stanford Law School, their minds sharpened by years of studying tax law and moral philosophy. From his earliest days, young Sam was surrounded by conversations about ethics, utilitarianism, and the question that would come to define his life. How does one do the most good in the world? The family home on the Stanford campus was filled with books and intellectual debate. Sam and his younger brother Gabriel were raised as what the family called take no prisoners utilitarians, taught to weigh every decision by its potential impact on the greatest number of people. It was a philosophy that would later be used to justify both extraordinary generosity and catastrophic fraud. As a child, Sam was restless and brilliant. School bored him terribly. He once told his mother, crying with frustration, that he was so bored, he felt like he was going to die. His parents recognized his hunger for challenge and enrolled him in special mathematics programs where his abilities flourished. At Canada-USA Math Camp, a summer program for exceptionally talented students, Sam found his people. Numbers made sense to him in ways that social situations often did not. He attended Crystal Springs Upland School, a private institution in Hillsborough, California, before moving on to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in 2010. There, studying physics with a minor in mathematics, Sam would encounter two things that would alter the trajectory of his life forever. The first was the philosophy of effective altruism. The second was the intoxicating world of high-frequency trading. The awakening at MIT. During his third year at MIT, Sam attended a talk that changed everything. The speaker was William MacAskill, a young Scottish philosopher who was rapidly becoming one of the most influential voices in a movement called effective altruism. The core idea was deceptively simple. If you want to help the world, don't just follow your heart. Follow the data, calculate the maximum impact you can have, and then ruthlessly pursue it. For Sam, the message hit like a revelation. Here was a framework that spoke to his mathematical mind, a way to turn moral intuition into optimization problems. MacAskill suggested something even more provocative. For someone with Sam's analytical gifts, the best way to help the world might not be working directly for a charity. It might be earning as much money as possible, and then giving it away. This strategy had a name: earning to give. Sam graduated from MIT in 2014 with his physics degree and a new mission. He would become extraordinarily wealthy, and then he would save the world. His first stop was Jane Street Capital, a prestigious quantitative trading firm in New York City, where he quickly proved himself as a talented trader of international exchange-traded funds. He was good at this work, very good. But even as he climbed the ladder of finance, donating half of his salary to charity, Sam was looking for something bigger. The arbitrage awakening. In late 2017, something caught Sam's attention. Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies were surging in popularity, and a strange phenomenon had emerged. The same Bitcoin that sold for $10,000 in the United States might trade for $11,000 in Japan or $13,000 in South Korea. The prices were different, and the differences were enormous. To a trained trader, this was like finding money lying on the ground. The concept was called arbitrage, buying something cheap in one place and selling it for more somewhere else. In mature markets, these price gaps usually closed within seconds. But cryptocurrency was different. The infrastructure was primitive, the regulations unclear, and few professional traders had entered the space. Sam saw an opportunity that others had missed. He left Jane Street and briefly worked at the Center for Effective Altruism in Berkeley. But his mind was on the crypto markets. In November 2017, with funding from investors who believed in his vision, Sam launched Alameda Research, named for the California county where he was based. The company would exploit the pricing gaps in cryptocurrency markets, moving up to $25 million per day through a practice called the kimchi premium trade, named for the especially large price differences in South Korean markets. The profits were staggering. In its early days, Alameda Research sometimes made $1 million in a single day. The money flowed like water, and Sam began to imagine something even grander. Why just trade on other people's exchanges when you could build your own? The birth of FTX. In April 2019, Sam Bankman-Fried founded FTX, a cryptocurrency derivatives exchange, launching it the following month from Hong Kong. The name was simple, almost crude. FTX, Futures Exchange. Sam himself admitted he was not good at naming things, but what the company lacked in creativity, it made up for in ambition. FTX offered something the crypto world desperately needed: a professional-grade trading platform with sophisticated risk management, competitive fees, and a dizzying array of products. Users could trade not just Bitcoin and Ethereum, but hundreds of other tokens, options, futures, and leveraged positions that amplified both gains and losses. The platform created its own token called FTT, offering discounts and benefits to those who held it. Within months, FTX was processing billions of dollars in trades. Venture capitalists came calling, pouring hundreds of millions into the company. By January 2022, FTX had raised $400 million at a valuation of $32 billion. Sam Bankman-Fried, at just 29 years old, was one of the richest people on the planet. Forbes estimated his net worth at $26 billion, making him the 41st wealthiest American. The world was paying attention. Sam appeared on magazine covers and testified before Congress. He rubbed shoulders with Bill Clinton and Tony Blair at industry conferences. Tom Brady and Gisele Bündchen became celebrity ambassadors for FTX. Larry David starred in a Super Bowl commercial mocking skeptics of the platform. The Miami Heat played their home games in FTX Arena. It seemed like Sam Bankman-Fried could do no wrong. But behind the carefully crafted image of the crypto wunderkind in his t-shirt and shorts, something far darker was taking shape, and it would all center on a tropical paradise that seemed too perfect to be true. The flight to paradise. In September 2021, Sam Bankman-Fried made a decision that would eventually seal his fate. He moved the entire senior leadership of FTX and Alameda Research from Hong Kong to the Bahamas. The island nation had recently passed laws designed to attract cryptocurrency companies, offering regulatory clarity that was lacking in other jurisdictions. For Sam, it was the perfect opportunity. The choice of location was strategic. The Bahamas offered favorable tax treatment, a time zone convenient for trading across global markets, and something else: distance. Far from the prying eyes of American regulators, Sam could build his empire exactly as he wished. The Bahamian government welcomed him with open arms, eager for the jobs and prestige that FTX would bring. When Sam went searching for a home, he did not settle for ordinary luxury. He found the Albany, one of the most exclusive residential communities on Earth. Developed in 2010 by British billionaire Joe Lewis with investments from musician Justin Timberlake and golfers Tiger Woods and Ernie Els, the Albany sprawled across 600 waterfront acres, sealed off from the outside world by gates and guards. Forbes in 2019 had called the Albany one of the most exclusive resorts in the world. Inside its walls lay a marina for mega yachts, a golf course designed by Ernie Els, tennis courts, a private school, a luxury hotel, and a recording studio that had hosted Drake, Mariah Carey, and Alicia Keys. A giant replica of Wall Street's Charging Bull statue stood on the grounds, as if to remind residents of the wealth that brought them here. And there, rising above it all, was the crown jewel: the Orchid Building, with its custom-made orchid cutout facade inspired by the French Quarter in New Orleans. On the 6th floor of this architectural masterpiece, Sam Bankman-Fried claimed his throne. A penthouse worth nearly $40 million, with 5 bedrooms, Italian marble floors, a private elevator, a spa, a hot tub on the balcony, a swimming pool, and a baby grand piano. Views of the turquoise ocean stretched in every direction, the waves crashing gently on the shores of paradise. For a man who had publicly claimed he was not much of a consumer, who drove a modest Toyota Corolla and proclaimed his intention to give away his fortune, it was quite a home, the crypto commune. But Sam did not live alone in his palace. In keeping with his philosophy that human connections and communication were paramount, he moved in with 9 of his closest colleagues and confidants. The $40 million penthouse became something between a luxury dormitory and a jury-rigged trading floor, a strange hybrid that perfectly captured the contradictions at the heart of Sam's empire. The curved marble living room was rimmed with computer desks, each supporting various configurations of conjoined monitors where traders watched markets around the clock. Kitschy, beach-themed decor lined the built-in display shelves, an odd counterpoint to the gleaming marble and ocean views. In the center of the room, a lumpy black beanbag lay tucked beneath the baby grand piano, and visitors often could not decide which seemed more out of place. Among those who shared the penthouse was Caroline Ellison, the young CEO of Alameda Research and Sam's on-again, off-again romantic partner. There was Gary Wang, the quiet co-founder of FTX, who had known Sam since they were students at a math camp as teenagers. And Nishad Singh, FTX's director of engineering, who had initially objected to the super-ostentatious penthouse, but relented when Sam said he would pay $100 million just to end the drama of house hunting. The arrangement was unusual, to say the least. These were not college roommates sharing a cramped apartment. These were executives running a $32 billion company, making decisions that affected millions of customers around the world, all while living in the same luxury penthouse and sometimes sleeping with each other. Visitors who came to the Albany were struck by the contradictions. The penthouse was the nicest home many had ever stepped inside, with its gleaming floors and panoramic views. But the bookshelf in the hallway looked like it came from IKEA. The fridge was stocked with bottles of vegan egg substitute, and the rooms showed few signs of personal life. One video blogger who interviewed Sam there described it as feeling like a hotel room for an extended stay. It felt like a place where smart people lived, he said, but it did not feel like a home. The lifestyle of crypto royalty. Life inside the Albany bubble was unlike anything the outside world could imagine. FTX employees could request any groceries they wanted twice a week, and the deliveries arrived like clockwork. Meals were frequently comped, parties were thrown regularly, and a personal chauffeur service shuttled workers around the island. One former employee recalled an FTX worker requesting a pair of toenail clippers over Slack, which was promptly delivered. They spent too much money constantly, she said. Sam himself maintained his carefully cultivated image of the ascetic billionaire, padding around in his trademark t-shirt and cargo shorts, his wild curly hair uncombed. He was frequently spotted walking the grounds of Albany like a regular tourist, which in that setting made him stand out spectacularly. There was no one who would bother him, a construction worker observed. It was like a different world there. But the lifestyle was anything but modest. Beyond the penthouse, FTX and its executives were buying up Bahamas real estate at a breathtaking pace. Property records would later reveal that the company and its insiders had purchased at least 19 properties worth nearly $300 million in just 2 years. Sam's parents, the Stanford law professors, became signatories on a $16 million waterfront estate in the exclusive Old Fort Bay community. Another $60 million went toward a plot of land where FTX planned to build a gleaming new headquarters, though construction never began. The company employed around 300 people on the island, many of them local Bahamians who handled logistics and catering at the beck and call of Sam and his inner circle. The offices were located in a sparse office park on the west side of New Providence, comprising about 30 small rectangular buildings that employees called huts. A telegram group allowed workers to hail a company shuttle between the Albany and the office, where business hours ran unconventional. Gary Wang sometimes kept office hours from 5 in the evening until 4 in the morning. Sam himself held important meetings at odd hours, and the lines between work and life blurred into meaninglessness. In April 2022, FTX hosted its first Crypto Bahamas conference at the Baha Mar Resort, a 4-day extravaganza that drew the elite of finance, technology, and politics. Bill Clinton spoke. Tony Blair attended. Tom Brady and Gisele Bündchen mingled with venture capitalists and crypto evangelists. One executive described it as Crypto Sun Valley, a reference to the famous gathering of media moguls in Idaho. Sam stood at the center of it all, shaking hands with world leaders and basking in the adulation. Just days before the conference, Sam had stood alongside Philip Davis, the Prime Minister of the Bahamas, to break ground on that $60 million headquarters. The future seemed limitless. FTX was expanding at breakneck speed, acquiring struggling crypto companies, hiring aggressively, and cementing its position as the second-largest cryptocurrency exchange in the world. No one attending those champagne-soaked parties could have imagined that in just 7 months it would all come crashing down. That the money funding these lavish lifestyles was not FTX's money at all. It belonged to customers who believed their funds were safely held in their trading accounts. $8 billion of it would simply vanish. the cracks beneath the surface. Behind the marble floors and ocean views, the $40 million penthouse harbored secrets that would eventually destroy everything Sam Bankman-Fried had built. The relationship between FTX and Alameda Research was not what it appeared to be. On the surface, they were separate companies with separate management. In reality, the wall between them had holes large enough to drive billions of dollars through. FTX customers deposited money into the exchange believing it was safely segregated, available for withdrawal whenever they wanted. The platform's terms of service explicitly stated that customer funds would not be used for any other purpose. But according to prosecutors who would later bring charges, that was never true. From almost the very beginning, customer deposits were flowing to Alameda Research, where they were used to make risky bets, fund venture capital investments, purchase real estate, and sustain the lavish lifestyles of Sam and his inner circle. The mechanism was hidden behind a digital backdoor, a secret feature in FTX's software that allowed Alameda to withdraw unlimited funds without triggering the normal risk controls. While other traders faced automatic liquidation, if their accounts became negative, Alameda could borrow with impunity. Tens of billions of dollars flowed through this hidden channel, and almost no one knew. Inside the penthouse, those who did know wrestled with their consciences. In the summer of 2022, Adam Yedidia, an FTX employee and one of Sam's roommates, discovered something troubling while fixing a bug in the company's code. The numbers revealed an $8 billion hole, a massive debt that Alameda apparently owed to FTX. On one of the Albany's paddle courts, beneath the stadium lights, Yedidia confronted Sam about what he had found. The conversation was brief but chilling. Yedidia was worried because if Alameda spent money that belonged to FTX customers, that money would not be there when customers tried to withdraw it. Sam's response, whatever it was, did not put his friend's concerns to rest. Within months, Yedidia would leave the company and eventually become a cooperating witness for federal prosecutors. But in the summer of 2022, the full extent of the crisis was not yet visible. The cryptocurrency market was crashing, wiping out hundreds of billions of dollars in value. Companies that had borrowed recklessly during the boom times were collapsing under the weight of their debts. Celsius Network, Voyager Digital, and Three Arrows Capital all went bankrupt, freezing billions in customer assets. And who emerged as the hero of this crisis? Sam Bankman-Fried. While others scrambled for survival, FTX seemed flush with cash. Sam dangled bailout packages worth hundreds of millions of dollars, swooping in to save struggling companies and their customers. The financial press fawned over him. They called him the next Warren Buffett. They called him crypto's lender of last resort. They called him a white knight. Inside the penthouse overlooking the Caribbean, Sam played the part perfectly. He gave interviews from his beanbag chair, his screens glowing with trading data, projecting the image of a brilliant but humble innovator who just wanted to help. His public persona was that of a philosophical do-gooder who happened to be very good at making money, someone who planned to give it all away anyway. So what did it matter how much he accumulated? The truth, as prosecutors would later allege, was that Sam's apparent generosity was funded by other people's money. The bailouts came not from FTX's profits, but from customer deposits that had been illegally diverted. The White Knight's armor was made of stolen gold. The 10 days that shook crypto. November 2nd, 2022. A reporter at CoinDesk, a cryptocurrency news outlet, published an article that would set off a chain reaction, destroying everything Sam Bankman-Fried had built. The story revealed something that few people outside Sam's inner circle knew. Alameda Research's balance sheet was built on a foundation of FTT, the token that FTX itself had created. The implications were staggering. Alameda held billions of dollars worth of FTT, using it as collateral to secure loans. But FTT's value depended on the health of FTX itself. If people lost confidence in the exchange, the token would crash, taking Alameda down with it. And if Alameda collapsed, what would happen to the customer funds that had been secretly funneled to it? Changpeng Zhao, the CEO of Binance, FTX's largest rival, saw the opening. On November 6th, he announced on Twitter that Binance would sell its entire holdings of FTT tokens, worth roughly $580 million. He cited recent revelations about FTX's finances and concerns about the relationship between the exchange and Alameda. The message to the market was clear. Something was very wrong. Caroline Ellison, tweeting from somewhere in the Albany complex, tried to stem the panic. She offered to buy Binance's tokens at $22 each, signaling confidence in their value, but the damage was done. FTX users began withdrawing their funds en masse, and within hours, it became clear that the exchange could not meet the demand. For every dollar that customers tried to withdraw, there was only a fraction available. On November 8th, with the situation spiraling out of control, Binance announced a stunning development. It had signed a non-binding letter of intent to acquire FTX, subject to due diligence. For a brief moment, it seemed like salvation might be at hand. Perhaps the crisis could be contained. Perhaps customers would be made whole. But Binance's review of FTX's books lasted less than a day. On November 9th, the company walked away, citing reports of mishandled customer funds and regulatory investigations. There would be no rescue. FTX was on its own. Inside the penthouse on the 6th floor of the Orchid building, chaos reigned. Sam furiously tapped out tweets, trying to reassure customers that their funds were safe. He apologized for the company's liquidity crisis, blamed poor internal systems, and promised that Alameda was winding down its operations. But even as he typed, the situation was deteriorating faster than anyone could control. By November 11th, it was over. FTX, Alameda Research, and more than 130 affiliated companies filed for bankruptcy. Sam Bankman-Fried resigned as CEO, replaced by John J. Ray III, a restructuring expert who had overseen the liquidation of Enron 2 decades earlier. When Ray examined what remained of FTX's operations, he was appalled. In 40 years of legal and restructuring experience, he would later tell Congress, he had never seen such a complete failure of corporate controls. There was no record-keeping whatsoever. This was not sophisticated fraud. This was just plain old embezzlement. The Bahamian Securities Commission moved quickly, freezing the assets of FTX Digital Markets, the local subsidiary. The Prime Minister, who had stood proudly with Sam just 7 months earlier, now spoke of holding accountable all individuals who may have betrayed the public trust. The party was over. The penthouse had fallen silent. Where once the marble halls echoed with the clatter of keyboards and the murmur of traders watching markets around the clock, now there was only stillness. The baby grand piano sat untouched. The beanbag where Sam had given countless interviews lay empty. The monitors that once displayed billions of dollars in trading activity showed nothing at all. In the days following FTX's bankruptcy on November 11, 2022, the Albany compound transformed from a crypto paradise into something closer to a gilded prison. Sam Bankman-Fried remained in his $40 million penthouse, but the circumstances had changed dramatically. The shuttles no longer ran to the empty offices. The parties had stopped. The celebrities and politicians who once clamored for his attention had gone dark, scrubbing their social media of any association with the disgraced crypto king. Neighbors in the exclusive community reported seeing Sam hunkered down inside, rarely venturing out. The curtains were often drawn, though occasionally a floor-to-ceiling window would be open, the drapes dancing in the warm Bahama breeze before someone inside pulled it closed again. His parents, the Stanford law professors Joseph Bankman and Barbara Fried, flew to Nassau to be with their son. They were spotted on the penthouse balcony, looking out at the same turquoise waters that had once seemed to promise unlimited possibility. The final interviews. Even as his empire crumbled, Sam could not stop talking. In those strange weeks between bankruptcy and arrest, he gave interview after interview, speaking to reporters from his penthouse, trying desperately to control the narrative of his own destruction. He appeared via video link at conferences, apologized repeatedly, and offered explanations that grew more convoluted with each telling. He had made mistakes, he said. He had not been paying attention to the relationship between FTX and Alameda. He had trusted others to manage risks that he should have overseen himself. The word he used most often was sorry. He was sorry that customers could not withdraw their funds. He was sorry that employees had lost their jobs. He was sorry that the whole thing had happened. But there were things he would not say. He denied that customer funds had been stolen, even as evidence mounted to the contrary. He claimed ignorance of the back door in FTX's software that had allowed Alameda to borrow without limits. He painted himself as an overwhelmed entrepreneur who had simply lost track of his growing empire, not as someone who had deliberately orchestrated one of the largest financial frauds in history. In one particularly revealing moment, during an interview recorded around the time of the collapse, Sam let slip what he really thought about the regulatory framework he had publicly championed. When asked about his previous testimony before Congress, where he had positioned himself as a responsible voice calling for sensible crypto regulation, Sam's mask slipped. His response was blunt and profane. He dismissed regulators with contempt, revealing a private attitude that contradicted everything he had said in public. The journalist who obtained this exchange would later share it with prosecutors. It would become evidence of what they called Sam's calculated deception, proof that the humble philosopher-billionaire persona was itself a fraud. The world closes in. As November turned to December, the walls around Sam Bankman-Fried grew tighter by the day. The Securities and Exchange Commission announced it was investigating FTX for securities fraud. The Commodity Futures Trading Commission launched its own probe. The Department of Justice began presenting evidence to a grand jury in New York. Class action lawsuits multiplied like mushrooms after rain. The new leadership of FTX, headed by bankruptcy specialist John Ray, began peeling back the layers of chaos left behind. What they found was almost beyond belief. There were no accurate records of cash balances or the complete list of bank accounts. Corporate funds had been used like a personal piggy bank, funding everything from real estate purchases to political donations to luxury condominiums for employees. The distinction between company money and customer money had been erased almost entirely. Ray, the man who had cleaned up after Enron, told Congress that FTX represented a complete failure of corporate controls at every level. The company had been run as Sam's personal fiefdom, with no board oversight, no independent auditors, and no separation between the businesses that were supposed to be kept apart. It was not sophisticated, Ray emphasized. This was just taking money from customers and using it for your own purpose. Inside the penthouse, Sam continued his media tour. seemingly oblivious to the legal noose tightening around him. He was scheduled to testify virtually before the House Financial Services Committee on December 13th. His prepared remarks, which would later be leaked to the press, continued the theme of apologetic incompetence. He had made mistakes. He was deeply sorry. He would spend the rest of his life trying to make things right. He never got to deliver those remarks. The arrest. On the evening of December 12, 2022, officers of the Royal Bahamas Police Force arrived at the Albany compound. They made their way to the Orchid Building, rode the private elevator to the 6th floor, and knocked on the door of the most expensive penthouse in the country. Sam Bankman-Fried was placed under arrest at approximately 6 o'clock in the evening. The charges came from the Southern District of New York, one of the most aggressive federal prosecutors' offices in America. Wire fraud, conspiracy, securities fraud, conspiracy, money laundering. The indictment painted a picture not of innocent mistakes, but of deliberate, systematic theft. Sam had stolen billions from customers who trusted FTX to safeguard their money. He had lied to investors who poured hundreds of millions into his company. He had used the stolen funds to enrich himself and maintain power. Philip Davis, the Prime Minister of the Bahamas, who had once stood proudly with Sam at the groundbreaking ceremony for FTX's planned headquarters, now struck a different tone. The Bahamas and the United States have a shared interest in holding accountable all individuals associated with FTX who may have betrayed the public trust and broken the law, Davis declared. Sam was transferred to Fox Hill, the Bahamas' only prison, a facility notorious for its harsh and unsanitary conditions. According to officials who had contact with him there, the former billionaire spent his days watching movies and reading news, mostly articles about himself. The fall from the marble floors of the Orchid Penthouse to the concrete cells of Fox Hill was as swift as it was complete. The extradition. Within days, American authorities were pressing for Sam's return to face trial. Under the extradition treaty between the Bahamas and the United States, the process could have taken months if Sam chose to fight it. But after less than 2 weeks in Fox Hill, he agreed to waive his rights and return voluntarily. On December 21, 2022, Sam Bankman-Fried was escorted onto a plane bound for the United States. Photographs from that day show him in handcuffs, his wild curly hair still uncombed, wearing a suit that looked borrowed. The Royal Bahamas Police Force walked him across the tarmac, and then he was gone, leaving behind the paradise he had built and the wreckage he had created. He would never return to the $40 million penthouse. The property, along with everything else FTX had purchased in the Bahamas, became part of the bankruptcy estate, assets to be liquidated in an attempt to repay the customers and creditors who had lost everything. Meanwhile, the people who had shared that penthouse were making their own calculations. One by one, Sam's closest allies were cutting deals with prosecutors, trading their testimony for the possibility of lighter sentences. The betrayal of the inner circle. Caroline Ellison had run Alameda Research at Sam's direction, executing the trades and transfers that moved billions of dollars of customer funds into the hedge fund's accounts. She had been his romantic partner, his roommate in the penthouse, and one of his closest confidants. Now she was cooperating with federal prosecutors. On December 19th, 2 days before Sam's extradition, Caroline pleaded guilty to 7 charges, including wire fraud, securities fraud, and money laundering. In exchange for her testimony against Sam, she hoped to receive a reduced sentence. Her allocution was damning. She admitted that she had helped steal billions of dollars from FTX customers at Sam's direction, She had lied to lenders who extended credit to Alameda. She had known the whole time that what they were doing was wrong. Gary Wang, the quiet co-founder who had known Sam since their teenage days at math camp, made the same choice. He pleaded guilty to fraud charges and agreed to cooperate. So did Nishad Singh, the engineering director who had initially objected to the ostentatious penthouse, but had gone along with everything else. The three people closest to Sam in the world, the ones who had shared his home and helped build his empire, were now prepared to testify against him. The government's case was taking shape. Prosecutors alleged that the fraud had begun almost from the start of FTX's operations and had continued for years. Sam had directed his lieutenants to create the backdoor that allowed Alameda to withdraw unlimited funds. He had personally approved the diversion of customer deposits. He had lied to investors, regulators, and the public, while using stolen money to fund his political ambitions and luxury lifestyle. The total amount missing was staggering. More than $8 billion had vanished from customer accounts. The victims numbered in the millions, ordinary people around the world who had trusted FTX with their savings, their retirement funds, their hopes for financial security. Many of them would never see their money again. The trial. On October 3, 2023, the trial of United States versus Samuel Bankman-Fried began at the Daniel Patrick Moynihan United States Courthouse in Manhattan. The courthouse sits at 500 Pearl Street, a modernist tower in Lower Manhattan, just blocks from the financial district, where Sam had once been celebrated as a visionary. Now he sat at the defense table in a gray suit, his wild curls trimmed short, facing the possibility of spending the rest of his life in prison. The government's case was methodical and devastating. Prosecutors laid out evidence showing that Sam had personally directed the theft of customer funds, that he had known exactly what was happening, and that his public persona of the humble, effective altruist was a calculated lie designed to attract more victims. The star witnesses were the people who had lived with him in that penthouse overlooking the Caribbean. Caroline Ellison took the stand and testified for days, walking prosecutors through the mechanics of the fraud. She described how Sam had directed her to commit crimes, how they had discussed the risks and decided to proceed anyway. When asked about Sam's carefully cultivated image, the messy hair and wrinkled t-shirts that made him seem like a harmless nerd, Caroline revealed it was all an act. Sam believed that he had received higher bonuses at Jane Street because of his hair, she testified. He used his appearance as an important part of FTX's narrative and image. The schlubby look was not authenticity, it was marketing. Gary Wang testified about creating the software backdoor that allowed Alameda to take customer funds. Nishad Singh described how he had raised concerns about the company's finances, only to be reassured by Sam that everything was under control. One former employee after another took the stand to paint a picture of a company built on lies, run by a man who believed rules did not apply to him. And then Sam made a fateful decision. Against the advice of many legal experts, he chose to testify in his own defense. He spent 3 days on the witness stand, trying to convince the jury that he had been overwhelmed by his growing empire, that he had not intended to steal from customers, that the whole disaster was the result of mistakes rather than malice. It did not go well. Under cross-examination, Sam was evasive, contradictory, and often unable to answer basic questions about his own company. Judge Lewis Kaplan, who was presiding over the trial, would later describe it as the worst performance by a witness he had seen in 30 years on the bench. Bankman-Fried had lied repeatedly under oath, the judge concluded. When he was not lying, he was hair-splitting, dodging questions, and refusing to give straight answers. On November 2, 2023, Exactly 1 year after the CoinDesk article that had triggered FTX's collapse, the jury reached its verdict. Guilty on all 7 counts: wire fraud conspiracy, securities fraud conspiracy, commodities fraud conspiracy, money laundering. The crypto king had been convicted of everything. The sentencing. Sam Bankman-Fried sat in a federal detention center for months awaiting his fate. Judge Kaplan had revoked his bail before the trial even began, after prosecutors accused him of trying to intimidate witnesses, including leaking Caroline Ellison's private diary entries to the press. The man who had once commanded a $32 billion empire now wore a khaki prison uniform and waited to learn how many decades he would spend behind bars. Federal sentencing guidelines suggested he could receive more than 100 years in prison. Prosecutors asked for 40 to 50 years, citing the extraordinary scope of his crimes and his complete lack of remorse. Sam's defense attorneys argued for a sentence of 5 to 6 years, claiming that their client was a brilliant but misguided young man who had never intended to hurt anyone. On March 28, 2024, Sam Bankman-Fried returned to Judge Kaplan's courtroom for sentencing. He addressed the court in a rambling speech, expressing sorrow for the collapse of FTX and the harm it had caused. "A lot of people feel really let down," he said. "They were very let down, and I am sorry about that." But even then, even facing decades in prison, he could not bring himself to admit what he had done. He apologized for what had happened, not for what he had done. He expressed regret that his employees and co-founders had been dragged down with him, but he did not acknowledge that he had directed them to commit crimes. The carefully constructed persona of the misunderstood genius persisted to the very end. Judge Kaplan was not persuaded. He tore into Sam's testimony, his conduct throughout the trial, and his continued refusal to accept responsibility. He knew what he was doing was wrong, Kaplan declared. He knew it was criminal. He regrets that he made a very bad bet about the likelihood of being caught, but he has never accepted that he did anything wrong. The sentence was 25 years in federal prison. Sam was also ordered to forfeit $11 billion, the amount he was found to have gained from his crimes. Under the First Step Act and various time credit programs, he might actually serve around 18 years. He would be nearly 50 years old when he emerged, assuming he served the full reduced sentence. As he was led away, Sam's parents sat in the courtroom, their faces etched with grief. "We are heartbroken," they said in a statement afterward. "We will continue to fight for our son." The Stanford law professors who had raised their child on utilitarian principles, who had taught him to calculate the greatest good for the greatest number, now watched as he disappeared into the federal prison system. The fate of the inner circle. Sam was not the only one facing consequences. Caroline Ellison, Gary Wang, and Nishad Singh all awaited their own sentencing hearings, their fates tied to the value of their cooperation against their former leader. Ryan Salame, the FTX executive who had signed the deed for the Penthouse purchase, pleaded guilty to campaign finance violations and would receive his own prison sentence. The celebrity endorsers who had lent their faces to FTX advertisements faced class action lawsuits. Tom Brady, Gisele Bündchen, Stephen Curry, Shaquille O'Neal, Larry David, and others were accused of failing to perform adequate due diligence before promoting the exchange to their millions of followers. The Super Bowl commercial that had mocked crypto skeptics now seemed less like clever marketing and more like evidence of collective delusion. The Miami Heat quietly renamed their arena, removing FTX from the building where they had once proudly displayed the company's logo. The naming rights deal that had seemed like a coup for crypto legitimacy became an embarrassment to be scrubbed away. And in the Bahamas, the Albany compound continued its quiet existence, though the crypto residents were long gone. The FTX offices in the business park sat empty, guarded by security personnel with nothing left to protect. The $60 million plot where Sam had broken ground for the company's headquarters remained an undeveloped tract of weeds, a monument to promises never kept. What remains? Today, the $40 million penthouse still stands atop the Orchid Building, its wraparound terrace still offering views of the marina and the endless Caribbean beyond. The baby grand piano may still sit in the marble living room. The hot tub on the balcony may still overlook the water where Sam once moored his 52-foot yacht. But everything has changed. The penthouse and all the other FTX properties in the Bahamas became assets of the bankruptcy estate, to be sold to help repay creditors. The new management of FTX, working through the wreckage left behind, managed to recover more than Sam or anyone else had expected. Cryptocurrency markets rebounded after the crash, and the digital assets that FTX still held increased dramatically in value. By early 2024, the estate announced that it expected to repay customers in full for the dollar value of their deposits at the time of bankruptcy. But that repayment came with a bitter irony. Customers who had held Bitcoin or Ethereum in their FTX accounts would receive dollars based on what those coins were worth in November 2022, when the exchange collapsed. By the time payments began, those same cryptocurrencies had more than tripled in value. Customers who had held one Bitcoin worth $16,000 at bankruptcy would receive $16,000 in cash, even though that same Bitcoin was now worth $60,000 or more. The fraud had stolen not just their money, but their opportunity. The gains they would have made if their assets had been properly safeguarded, if the market recovery had benefited them instead of being captured by the bankruptcy process. Those gains were gone forever. The customers were technically made whole, and yet many felt they had been robbed twice. The meaning of the penthouse. What does a $40 million penthouse mean when the money that bought it was stolen? What do Italian marble floors represent when they were laid with funds that should have been safeguarding the savings of teachers, nurses, and retirees around the world? The Orchid Building still stands as an architectural marvel. Its custom facade still catches the Caribbean light. But its most famous resident has become a cautionary tale, a symbol of everything that can go wrong when ambition is unmoored from ethics. Sam Bankman-Fried claimed to be motivated by effective altruism, the philosophical movement that demands we calculate the maximum good we can do, and then do it. He spoke of earning to give, accumulating vast wealth so that it could be directed to causes that would benefit humanity. He donated millions to pandemic preparedness, to artificial intelligence safety, to political campaigns he believed would protect democracy. But the utilitarian calculus he claimed to follow contained a fatal flaw. You cannot do good with stolen money. You cannot maximize benefit by first maximizing harm. The philosophy that was supposed to guide Sam toward saving the world instead became a rationalization for taking whatever he wanted from whoever had it. The ends justified the means, until the means destroyed everyone, including Sam himself. In prison, Sam has reportedly continued to maintain his innocence, telling anyone who will listen that he was simply overwhelmed by his growing empire, that mistakes were made, that he never intended to hurt anyone. The appeal of his conviction is winding through the courts. His lawyers argue that he did not receive a fair trial, that the judge was biased, that the evidence was misinterpreted. But the jury saw the evidence. They heard the testimony of the people who lived with Sam in that penthouse, who watched him direct the movement of billions of dollars from customer accounts to his own purposes. They heard him testify in his own defense and found his explanations unbelievable. 12 ordinary citizens, presented with the facts of what happened at FTX, concluded unanimously that Sam Bankman-Fried was guilty of fraud. The final reflection: stand today on the terrace of that penthouse if you could, and look out at the view that Sam Bankman-Fried once surveyed as master of his domain. The yachts still bob in the marina. The palm trees still sway in the tropical breeze. The sun still sets in spectacular oranges and purples over the Caribbean, painting the water in colors that seem too vivid to be real. Somewhere in that view, you might see the replica of Wall Street's charging bull, placed there to remind Albany's wealthy residents of the fortunes that brought them to paradise. And somewhere nearby, you might find the Fearless Girl statue, the symbol of those who stand up against overwhelming power. Sam Bankman-Fried thought he could be both, the bull and the girl, the accumulator of wealth and the champion of good. He believed that his intelligence and his philosophy gave him permission to take risks that others could not, to bend rules that should have constrained him, to use other people's money to fund his vision of a better world. In the end, he was neither the bull nor the girl. He was simply a thief in a t-shirt, a fraud with a philosophy degree, a man who convinced himself that he was saving the world while he robbed it blind. The penthouse was not a monument to success. It was evidence of a crime. The marble floors are cold now. The monitors are dark. The beanbag chair sits empty beneath a piano that no one plays. And in a federal prison far from the Caribbean sun, a man who was once worth $26 billion serves the first years of a 25-year sentence, with nothing but time to contemplate what he built, what he destroyed, and what he might have been. The story of Sam Bankman-Fried's Bahamas Penthouse is not really about real estate. It is about the seduction of wealth, the corruption of ideals, and the ancient human capacity for convincing ourselves that our crimes are actually virtues. It is about what happens when someone decides they are too smart to follow the rules that govern everyone else. The penthouse still stands. The waves still crash on the shores below, and the lesson echoes across the water, as old as human ambition itself. All empires built on lies must eventually fall. All palaces purchased with stolen gold become prisons in the end. The Bahamas remain beautiful. The Albany remains exclusive, but the $40 million penthouse that was supposed to be the throne room of crypto's king has become something else entirely. A reminder that there is no paradise for those who build their dreams on other people's ruins. And somewhere in the marble halls, in the silence where laughter once rang, in the emptiness where billions once flowed, the ghost of everything that might have been whispers its final truth. This is what remains when the fantasy ends. This is where crypto's empire came to die.